Hello and welcome to Beyond the Noise, the podcast series from PRWeek. I'm John Harrington, the editor of PRWeek UK, and I'm joined by my PRWeek colleagues, Editor-in-Chief Danny Rogers and Senior Reporter Evie Barrett. Hello to you both. Hope you're well today.
Yep, good, thanks.
Hi, John.
Back after Easter, so adjusting to real life again.
Indeed. Chocolate's
back in the
all gone.
office.
Indeed, yeah, absolutely. Before we start, a quick mention that it's time to get your tickets now for the 2025 Brand Film Awards, which take place on Wednesday, 30th of April at the Ham Yard Hotel in London. Delegates will get to view and be inspired by the best brand films out there and see which ones win, of course. So come and celebrate the craft, creativity and brilliance behind some of the best brand films around. Visit brandfilmawards.co.uk to book your place. Okay, so on 6th of May, PRWeek will reveal its annual rankings of the UK's 150 biggest PR consultancies in the UK Top 150 project. So look out for that. But this month, we've been revealing insights from the Top 150 questionnaire, which asked about major issues affecting the consultancy world. We're going to discuss some of these first off and what they tell us about the sector right now. So first, Danny, do you want to talk about the area you've been looking at?
Yes, John. Well, this survey data from a couple of hundred or so of the biggest PR agencies in the UK has been fascinating this year. It's a real insight into what's obviously been a tough year in the PR market, but still a very fast-changing one for the comms consultancy sector in general. So, for example, we asked about merger and acquisition experience and intentions for mergers and acquisitions. And actually, only 10% of agency bosses are currently planning to make any acquisition during 2025, which for what has always been a fairly entrepreneurial market and one characterised by a lot of SMEs, seems pretty low. As for why this is, Andrew Block, partner at advisory firm PCB Partners, summed it up pretty well when he told us it's been a challenging year for many PR agencies, with significant pressure on margins. While the industry remains resilient, some agency leaders are taking a more cautious approach to M&A. Economic uncertainty and dented confidence means some firms are very hesitant to deploy capital for acquisitions, instead prioritising stability, organic growth or internal investments, particularly in social, AI, data analytics and new service lines. However, nearly half, in fact 45% of all agencies, reported they had been approached by potential buyers over the past year. So there is acquisitive interest out there. And it seems like a lot of this interest is from private equity, which seems to be fueling the bulk of the buying of agencies that is being planned. An example of this is Bully Pulpit International, which has snapped up quite a few UK consultancies recently, including, of course, Seven Hills, quite a well-known London PR firm. I mean, unsurprisingly, the acquisition activity seems to be in those sectors that are booming at the moment, or at least doing better than others, like public affairs, political consultancy, strategic, corporate, or even B2B, which really does seem to be a very lively market at the moment. But consumer PR less so, less interested in buying consumer PR agencies this year. And of course, digital and social media prowess is always sought after. Bigger firms are either developing their own skills in these areas, or they are looking to bolt on teams from smaller agencies they buy. And the other big trend over the past year is that towards owners selling their agencies to employee ownership trusts rather than selling to another company. And our survey reveals that by far and away the most common form of ownership change over the past year was agencies becoming an EOT, Employee Ownership Trust. This included W Communications and Brand Nation in the last year alone. But of course, there's many of these EOT agencies now in the UK, from the early adopters like City Press in Manchester, right the way through to sports specialists such as Pitch. I don't know if that's something that you guys have noticed, that EOTs now seem to be more common than form of ownership than actually selling or buying an agency.
I think so. I get the impression that there was a real move towards this, probably, maybe it started during the Great Resignation, where there was this sense that you really need to do more to attract good people. And the fact is you can get some really good tax-free bonuses for staff, can't you? So it's quite a nice incentive to attract good employees. So I feel that might have been the sort of the start
Yeah.
of the boom, but it's interesting that it's still very much going on.
Yeah, it's a very good point, John. The other thing about EOT is you set the price. So you decide the price at which you sell it to the staff. Whereas, of course, if you're dealing with a trade buyer or a private equity, you have to negotiate that price. And in this market, it's quite difficult to negotiate a good price because it's quite a tough market. So I can see why people are tempted to sell part of their agencies to their teams, and then, they can still sell it afterwards.
I think in terms of the wider M&A trends, the things you're saying about consumer PR agencies are really interesting. I think we're at a point where we're probably seeing less M&A activity there. Even like you were saying, they're looking to develop their social media skills. I think a lot of them are choosing to do that internally and kind of either hire people or build the skills of the staff they already have, because PR and social are so intertwined now that a good consumer agency should really be able to do that without having to bring in a whole new team.
Very good point, Evie. Yeah, and also I guess a lot of those really good social digital media agencies have been snapped up by now as well. There's probably not that many left. As you say, they've been absorbed already into consumer PR departments. So that was the M&A side of things. Interestingly, more agencies, 13%, are actually looking to open overseas offices rather than open UK offices or make acquisitions. There's particular interest in expanding into Europe and particularly into the Middle East. I mean, I'm sure you guys have also noticed the rush to tap into the Middle East market at the moment, particularly in the travel, hospitality sector. Tech as well is fast growing in the Middle East. Saudi market, of course, is huge. So there's been a lot of activity in that area, expanding into those zones. In the UK, it seems to be mainly London agencies looking for offices elsewhere in the country, particularly Manchester or Yorkshire, North West and North East. Or it's successful non-London agencies also looking to add a base in the capital. So that seems to be the trend within the UK.
I think it's noticeable that what we thought might be a bit of a rush to the regions probably hasn't really happened that much. I think it was maybe a kind of hopeful sense that the industry would flatten out a bit in terms of, levelling up even, you could say, with having more increased rate of openings of new offices in other hubs outside the capital. I mean, obviously that is still happening, but I'm not sure it's really accelerated. I think it's probably stayed at the same rate. I mean, we've probably had some London agencies looking to open offices in Manchester and Leeds and a few other places. And as you say, Danny, non-London agencies opening the odd hub here. But I think, let's face it, rents aren't cheap in London. And I think it was a brief period when they were more affordable, immediately post-COVID. So I think there is probably more hesitancy there.
Yeah, there does seem to be, from our survey, an interest in tapping into the talent in different parts of the country, because obviously London's very competitive for PR talent, whereas there seems to be a lot of interest in people living in other parts of the country which aren't so saturated maybe by PR consultancies. Do you find that, Evie?
Yeah, I think so. But I think agencies are realising that they don't necessarily need a physical office in another space in order to get the talent from a different part of the UK. They can hire someone who comes in maybe once a month or even once a week, and that's still fairly feasible for now, I think.
Yeah, it does seem to be a trend. Even if you expand into Manchester, it doesn't necessarily mean that you need a large office there. You can just have a couple of people working from home, for example.
So Evie, you've been looking at the issue of agencies asking for higher fees from clients. What does the data show us there?
Yeah, so across 2024 and 2025, 3 in 4 of the agencies who we spoke to said that they'd asked for higher fees from clients. Of those, around 85% had been successful in doing so, which I'd say is a pretty strong majority. The agencies who did increase their rates largely attributed this to inflation and other growing costs. One mentioned the recent national insurance contribution hikes. These agencies said that clients are generally quite receptive because they're often facing similar challenges themselves. Tank said it succeeds in asking for higher client fees around 75% of the time, while First Light Group told us that it's hit and miss and it depends on each client. One agency said that retainer increases go down fairly well, but that project fees are trickier to navigate and can feel squeezed, especially as clients often opt for projects to keep overall costs down. And these two things can balance out and mean that the agency income is broadly flat. Ambitious notes that budgets are often more static when it comes to long-term clients, typically those they've been working with longer than 18 months. But to combat this kind of thing, ICPR said that it maintains transparency with clients, and where fees have increased but budgets haven't, they've scaled back their programmes in a way that has minimal client impact or created options for project add-ons throughout the year. They noted fee increases have to be matched with greater efficiencies on our end and more flexible delivery options. I mean, do you think that these agencies are within their rights to ask for higher fees without changing the scope of the work, or should they be ramping up the level of service in line with this? It strikes me that it sort of plays into the whole race to the bottom narrative that PR can sometimes be accused of and potentially underselling itself.
Yeah, well, they have to ask for higher fees if their costs are going up, I guess, if they want to stay profitable businesses. As long as they're confident that they are providing decent level of service, then I think they are within their rights to ask for higher fees. The problem is, of course, it's a very competitive market. So, it's always a risk saying we're going to put our fees up because we're brilliant. The client may say, actually, there's somebody else just as good who's going to undercut you. So I guess it's all about the confidence in your relationship with that client and your level of service. But it's tough for agencies, I think.
I think that's right. I think, personally, it's one thing to say clients should stand firm, but I actually think, in a way, it's a bit of a simplification. I mean, my view, the kind of scope of briefs are changing quite a lot, and what agencies offer in terms of their services are changing, and also client expectations are changing. So I feel a lot of the times it's a case of working smarter rather than harder, kind of using AI shortcuts we're starting to see, and we'll come on to that later, and a kind of mix of other services to help keep clients happy. So doing more with less effort maybe. So I guess what I'm saying is it's a bit less easy to have a kind of like for like comparison, because what the agencies are doing is changing and what clients are looking for specifically is changing as well. So I think it's a bit of a complicated picture, but broadly I do agree that agencies do need to, if their costs go up, then they should be asking for higher fees generally.
So are you saying then, John, that if they manage to become more efficient through AI, that they can actually cut their fees?
No, I'm saying that what agencies are offering is kind of changing. So I think if you're looking at, the evolution of a client brief, I think what the client is after is changing a bit, because there are so many more things to look into, and AI is a big one of those, making sure that you're on top of all of those changes and the changing sort of social media priorities and many, many other things that are evolving. So I don't think it's necessarily a like for like, if you see what I mean. Staying with client-agency relationships, you've been looking as well, Evie, at agencies surrendering accounts and whether they think clients are getting more demanding. What trends did we see there?
Well, perhaps unsurprisingly, most PR agencies do believe clients were more demanding in 2024. Around 1 in 5 said they were much more demanding, and just over half said they were slightly more. The general consensus is that clients want more for less, including more quality media coverage, but also things that would traditionally be outside of their scope of work. So more analytical reporting and lead generation, the type of activity that supports business development and measurable goals, not just brand building campaigns, as the jargon group put it. Goldbug said it's a case of being more strategic and insightful to satisfy clients. So pivoting to work which can clearly demonstrate return on investment, increase business alignment and integration. In terms of surrendering accounts, 1 in 3 PR agencies said they'd done so in 2024. Asked what proportion of their accounts they surrendered, the most common answer was between 1% and 3%. Very few surrendered more. But the comments on this topic suggest poor treatment from clients was a key factor in a lot of these cases. Issues such as late payments, clients not wanting to commit to a retainer, high demands, and being rude to staff came up. There are obviously less extreme cases too, where accounts were surrendered due to conflicts of interest or to keep team motivation up. Hard Numbers explained its, quote, no-nonsense approach to surrendering accounts, saying, "We have 4 reasons to work with a client: fame, fun, fortune, or fulfillment. If a client doesn't meet one of these 4 criteria, we'll sack them and move on. We've sacked clients in every year of trading so far." I mean, what do you make of that approach?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty difficult, isn't it? I mean, if your revenues are going down, it's quite difficult to keep sacking clients because you need to keep revenues up in order to keep your staff employed and keep your shareholders happy. But I do agree that I'm glad that agencies are surrendering clients when they become unsustainable, where they feel like they're being overworked or the client's being rude or abusive. And we have heard, haven't we, stories of that happening, quite commonplace, actually. So I do think it's important that agencies stand up for their staff and insist that it is a healthy relationship with them, the client.
Yeah, and I suppose especially from a consumer PR point of view, if you've been working with a client for a long time, there's only so many creative ideas that you can come up with if it's the same team on that account. Sometimes they might just feel like they've done all they can for that client and want someone else to have a go at it.
Sure.
I'm not surprised, to be honest, that more agencies are surrendering accounts. I know, as you say, some will drop clients who behave badly, and that is terrible, but it's not exactly new. I think that sort of thing has been around for a while. But I sort of go back to that point, really, that agencies are changing what they do, and many simply don't see the benefit of keeping certain accounts. It's the impression I get. So, for one example, we've written a lot of stories about consumer agencies evolving to take on more corporate work and do more above-the-line work. They may think that a traditional consumer PR brief that they might have taken on 2 or 3 years earlier no longer fits with what they do. So I feel there's a kind of structural reason for surrendering as well as individual behaviour elements. Okay, I'm going to discuss another couple of areas now. Firstly, AI. Inevitably, we'll get onto AI. We did discuss it earlier on, but it's 2025 and an industry podcast, so of course, agencies were asked to identify where they use AI with different tasks from a set list. Top of the list was research. 3 in 4 agencies use AI for that purpose. It was followed by transcription and or translation. Around 1 in 3 use it for creative campaigns, although far more, just under half, use it for creative image generation. A similar proportion use it for writing, for example, press releases or emails to media. My sense is that AI is mostly used for admin and laborious tasks at the moment, while there's still some reluctance to use it in creative campaigns to any great extent. We also asked agencies to describe the level of investment in AI at the moment. The most popular answer actually was small. 1 in 2 agencies gave that answer. Just under 1 in 4 chose moderate, and just a small minority, just over 1 in 10, went with substantial. I don't know about you, but it seems like most agencies are well aware of the scale of the task here and the amount of investment needed. I sense some nervousness, even a sense of being overwhelmed in some areas, and some respondents actually really played down the extent of their AI investment. One anonymous agency says, "We're using AI only for note-taking, translation and brainstorming at present. I believe we need to do more to prepare, although the quality of the written work AI produces is not yet client standard," which is interesting. Others were more confident. So CC Group says, "We have invested a great deal of time researching the most appropriate AI tools available across the AI spectrum to include Gen AI, large language models and analytical AI tools. We have been actively integrating AI tools into a range of our agency workflows to boost quality and efficiency." So what do you think? Do you get the sense that most agencies, if they're being honest, feel like they're sort of just trying to struggle through the new tech, or do you think there is increased confidence of using AI?
I suppose it differs enormously depending on the size of your agency. Because I'd imagine if you're working for, Publicis or WPP, these companies have been developing AI for 10 years, right? They've had whole teams of technical people developing products for years and years. Whereas if you're a small agency, it must be pretty challenging because you don't have that, right? All you've got is some PR specialists and a PR founder or something who's got to work out which technology to use and where it can be used. So I'm not surprised.
From conversations that I'm having with people, it does generally feel like compared to a year or 2 ago, people seem to know what they're talking about a bit more in terms of describing the practical uses of AI. It all feels a bit less speculative and daunting than it once did. It does surprise me that not as many agencies have made substantial investment in it yet. But I suppose, like you say, Danny, if they're smaller agencies, then they might not have the ability to develop whole new tools and kind of just using what's out there at the moment and going from there.
We as a media company are finding it hard to know where best to employ AI. There's all sorts of, it's not only using the technology, but there's a lot of security and confidentiality issues with using AI. So this is a pretty new technology. It's only been around. Large language models have only been around for a couple of years now. So I'm not surprised that it's challenging for small businesses.
I also wonder if there's a sense of coyness almost about admitting that agencies are using it for creative campaigns. Is there a sense that they want to look as though they're creative geniuses and they haven't, asked a robot to come up with their ideas, to put it a bit bluntly and unfairly? Could be some of that, but fascinating topic.
There's also the AI influencers area, which obviously Evie's a bit more of an expert on, having done a podcast recently on that. Is that an area you feel that PR companies have been investing in very much?
No, I feel like not many have really explored that yet. I mean, maybe some of the bigger agencies, there are a few examples of big brands using AI influencers successfully, but I feel like on a day-to-day basis, it's not the kind of thing that comes to mind straight away. I think a lot of agencies are still quite cautious and have seen backlash to various uses of AI influencers and not quite understanding where is best to use them yet. But I think that will come in the next year or so.
Yeah, and I recommend people listen to Evie's podcast on that topic because it's very informative.
Indeed. And moving on, the next topic I'm going to talk about is a controversial one, the return to the office. Now, this issue, of course, shot up the news agenda in January after WPP controversially increased the number of compulsory office days from 3 to 4 from this month. But research for the top 150 finds very few PR agencies intend to follow suit in 2025. Just 2.8% said they did. However, a notable minority, 13%, said they don't know. Most of these agencies completed the survey in February, so shortly after this story blew up. I wonder if that influenced them to think again, perhaps, given the backlash in some quarters. It's also worth saying that 17% of agencies had already upped the number of compulsory days in 2024. As you'd expect, the most popular number of mandatory days was 2 or 3. 3 out of 4 agencies chose either one of those or the other. More than 1 in 10 don't have any mandatory office days, on another extreme. A typical response here from the Jargon Group: it's a people business and people learn from people. We're aligned on 3 days a week in the office because that provides a fair balance between opportunities to learn and prioritising work. I believe the trend will be back to more time in the office as it creates an environment where people can progress more quickly. Some are more bullish, actually. One anonymous agency said it asks every new hire to commit to being in the office full time for their probation period. Others fear for the impact if inflexible policies become the norm. Blurred Chief Executive Nick Govia says, "Our industry has a major diversity problem and change won't happen unless we bend a bit and understand that not everyone's lives are the same or can flex in the same way." So we've discussed this issue at length in the past, but it is interesting to look at the numbers, isn't it? Do either of you have any more thoughts on tightening office mandates?
I do think for the most part, it's not so much to do with what the specific policy is, but more on how it's communicated and whether people like where they work, really. I think if they feel that the policy their employer has is justified and that it's a human approach, then they'll be willing to go along with it. I mean, maybe it's different. The older you get, different responsibilities like family and stuff. Certainly among people my age group, I think would be willing to go in, maybe not 5 days a week, but certainly 3, 4, and kind of, people like to see people. It's not that they don't want to be in the office. I think it's just as long as you feel like you've got a bit of work-life balance, really.
Yeah, of course, it's all changed post-pandemic as well, hasn't it? Because for a couple of years, or maybe 2 or 3 years, people were able to work mainly from home. And I suppose the big change was that the cost went up. So if you were commuting in from outside London to your office and you were only coming in 1 day a week or something, and then suddenly you're asked to come in 4 or 5, the personal cost to you goes up dramatically. But what we have seen, obviously, is a lot more agencies offering free lunches, free breakfasts, and there was a story about WPP starting to do that for all its staff. So I guess that's a way of challenging that particular problem. You know, you save staff money by giving them certain perks, or even give them maybe travel allowances. But yeah, I agree with Evie. I think generally the PR industry has adapted pretty well. I don't think PR agencies have a crisis generally with office working and how many days. I sense it's much more so in the, say, banking sector or lawyers or whatever like that, where it has been, or civil servants, right? It's been a really contentious issue in the civil service. But I think generally the PR industry has been pretty sensible about it.
Okay, that's all the time we have for now. Thanks to Danny and Evie for sharing your thoughts. If you've enjoyed today's episode, then we'd love it if you could leave a review, please, wherever you access PRWeek's Beyond the Noise podcast. Until next time, thanks for listening and goodbye.